Hello and welcome to week 5. I'm excited about this section. We're really starting a whole new era, starting really with 1964 and the explosion of the Beatles. The Beatles invade the United States. And as we look back in 7-year periods, 1956, Elvis on RCA Records started selling millions of records. We move ahead 7 years to 1964, to 1963, 56 to 63. The Beatles prepare to invade the U.S. Then we go 63 to 1970, always in 7-year movements. 1970, really the end of the 70s, with the deaths of 3 famous rock stars, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison. Also the deaths at Altamont, Kent State, and the Manson situation. And then we can move ahead to 1977, again a 7-year skip. And the Sex Pistols, what is this, maybe a second or third British invasion? 56 to 63, 63 to 70, 70 to 77. Very neat 7-year episodes. But the next 4 weeks, weeks 5, 6, 7, 8, if I can do my math correctly. So this week, the Beatles. Next week, we'll talk about African American music, especially Motown records and Atlantic records. Motown, of course, we know the Stars, the Supremes, the Four Tops, the Temptations. Atlantic records, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin. Then we'll also have to talk about James Brown and how, again, black music and white music really intermingling and changing the flow of pop culture. So that's 2 weeks, and in 3 weeks we'll really discuss the psychedelic movement. 1967, The Summer of Love, Sgt. Pepper, and also Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix's first album came out in 1967. And then finally, our 4th week in this section, the death of the 60s, as we just talked about, with the death of certain rock stars in Altamont. And we've got some videos we'll be watching in the next 4 weeks. The Beatles' first U.S. visit. We'll be watching that this week. Next week, this isn't the actual DVD box, this is just a picture of it. Standing in the Shadows of Motown, a great documentary about Motown records and the musicians who played on all those great songs for the Supremes, the Four Tops, the Temptations, Smokey Robinson, and the Miracles. Our 3rd week in this section, when we get into psychedelia and The Summer of Love and Jimi Hendrix, a documentary, Jimi Hendrix, Band of Gypsies. Jimi Hendrix's famous performance in 1969, New Year's Eve, at Bill Graham's Fillmore, I believe, in New York City. Jimi Hendrix. And last, the Rolling Stones, a documentary of their 1969 tour. I actually saw the Rolling Stones on that tour in Phoenix, Arizona, at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum, but the tour ended in December 69 at Altamont and ended in tragedy. More later in week 8. So we have all that happening, but as we look back on this period in time that we're looking at, the early 60s, it was a time of the Cold War. It always seems to come back to communism here. It was a time of the Cold War, but our new president that everyone seemed to love at the time, John F. Kennedy, seemed to be handling the Cold War. He was facing down Nikita Khrushchev and facing down Castro in Cuba with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he was taking care of business, and everybody seemed to like this guy, John F. Kennedy. But unfortunately, on November 22nd, 1963, he was shot down in Dallas, Texas, and our nation really was in a huge state of mourning at the time. It's hard to get that across. We've become very hardened to political assassination and political deaths, especially with the problems in the Mideast. But at this time in 1963, this was a huge shock to the nation. And I can still remember when I first heard about it, when I think I was in 4th grade, a very vivid memory. And so our country really needed something, and what did we get? We got the Beatles. They came here in 1964 and appeared on Ed Sullivan in February and just changed the whole mood. And some would call the Beatles' appearance on Ed Sullivan the defining moment in pop culture history of the last 50 years. And so we're going to look at all that stuff. We're also going to look at Katy Perry controversy and Anderson Cooper controversy. Again, Anderson Cooper on CNN, very liberal. Let's try and balance that with Fox News, maybe Bill O'Reilly on the other side, rather conservative. But we're going to see if we can get in the middle somewhere and look at both sides. Try not to get political about it, but just analyze the debates. Katy Perry and Anderson Cooper. And then also movies. We're going to watch some movies in the next 4 weeks, starting with a Stanley Kubrick movie, and we're going to return to Stanley Kubrick a few times throughout the semester, a great director. We're going to watch Dr. Strangelove for this week. Stanley Kubrick also did A Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey. He didn't do a lot of movies, but very consistent, high-quality movies. Stanley Kubrick, great director. Dr. Strangelove, 1964, a very dark, sinister, dark comedy look at the situation between the United States and Russia and the atomic bomb. Seems to always come back to that, doesn't it? Until we get into Vietnam, then it goes somewhere else, which is Stanley Kubrick's other movie, Full Metal Jacket, again, is indeed a Vietnam movie. And some other stuff we're going to look at, some other movies we'll be looking at in this period. Dr. Strangelove this week, and then also The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate next week, I think. And then last, Easy Rider, Dennis Hopper's big breakout movie from 1969, the two bikers on the road trip, Easy Rider. We're also going to talk about the song Louie Louie this week. So, Louie Louie, some people thought it had dirty lyrics. And some good stuff. So, be prepared for the Beatles, and be sure you look over everything. Be reading 3 books, Anti-Rock, chapters 10 through 13, your Gula Nonsense book, chapter 6, and start reading the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, chapter 4. More on that next week, but please start doing all those readings. And I'll see you next time.